Welcome to the TufFish. I am so excited to introduce to you today Dr. Cynthia Miller. Hi, Dr. Cynthia. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I would love to start by helping people to get to know your background a little bit more because you have a really interesting background. So would you mind sharing a bit about that? Because that's going to lead into why you wanted to write.
Oh, um, well, let's start when I was a little girl. My father built bombs, and when I was 4, he left for 13 months to go build the world's first hydrogen bomb. And when he came back, he had just watched it explode. And I was a very, very sensitive little girl, and I could sense what was going on. I could see things. So he'd watch the bomb explode, and a few nights later, he's home. And at dinner, I could see this bomb exploding, and I could envision the fallout, all this radiation. I could see it getting in the water. I could see it getting in the leaves of the plants. And I couldn't figure out how to separate it out. I'm 5 years old, and it's way beyond my vocabulary. But so at dinner, I said, "Who's going to clean up the mess?" And he stood up and he got very stern and he sent me to my room. Well, I've never been sent to my room, and never, that was the only time. And I'm sitting in the corner, all crunched up, hiding, terrified, and just thinking, my goodness, these adults they don't know what they're doing, number one. And then this thought came of, why do people kill each other? It just was beyond my grasp. He helped build the bombs dropped on Japan, and it was all kind of just hit me when I was 5. And so at that night, in that moment, something switched on inside of me of wanting to discover what it is that makes people want to hate and kill each other. And that kind of set the trajectory or the path of my entire life.
Wow. I mean, that's such a profound experience to have had, especially at such a young age. But you're right. And it sounds to me like what you also did was find a way to, it could have made you bitter or it could make you better. And I tend to look at things like that when something really awful has happened, especially when you wonder why me and how could this have happened? And so how did you shift to make things better and not let it make you bitter?
Oh, that took a really long time. I was really sick for most of my life. Everybody in my family was sick from the radiation.
Mm.
And so the healing journey took decades and decades. But there was also this intellectual curiosity of what was going on inside our brains or what was happening in our bodies. So I had this pain, but I also had this desire to understand more. And then in 1973, I had a near-death experience.
Oh, wow.
And then 2 days later, this profound energy whipped through and burst through the top of my head, and I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And I could see inside everybody's bodies, and I could see inside cells, and I could see multiple dimensions, and it was really difficult to function.
I can
Walking,
only imagine.
it was really hard. Walking down the street, I could see inside everybody's body, and it was just like, I didn't want to have all that information. It was just way too much. And then I could see, so it was the late 60s and the early 70s, and I was living in Berkeley, California at the time. And this is the free speech movement. And I mean, all that was going on in Berkeley. And it was like more than that was going on inside my body. But I'd look outside and the grass would all of a sudden become this psychedelics, just like the posters
Oh,
of
wow.
yeah. And the trees had these auras, and everything was just so intense. I'd walk into a record store and I could hear all the music that had ever been played, and I would pass out. I'd walk into the library and it was like all the thought forms and all the books would come cascading out, and I would drown in the thought forms of the books. So it was really, really challenging just to get through the day and to function. And I was seeing all these things. I could see the cells in my arms, and I could, as I said, see inside people's bodies, and all these dimensions opened up to me that I didn't know about just in one breath to the next. And I kept waiting for this to disappear. Well, it never did. So I have had to learn how to integrate all of that. So it's been a very interesting journey.
It sounds like it would have been. It absolutely, I mean, it really does. But it also sounds like, you know, it almost sounds like a new breadcrumb and a new breadcrumb and a new breadcrumb was still, like you kept kind of getting to a point to be able to write about it. And so how did you decide that this was something, or even bringing writing into this space? Was it something that you did as a way to release or process? Was it cathartic, or how did writing come into play with all of this?
Writing came in much later. And I started writing books, but I never published them. I just hid them. And even today, I have all this writing hidden in different parts of my computer. I have no idea where it all is. And over the years, people would hear little bits of my stories and they go, "You need to write a book." So I've heard this for probably 40 years. And then maybe 20 years ago is when I started dabbling and writing, but I never felt like I was good enough to write, or my writing was good enough. And then I took some classes, and then I joined a writers group and I started writing. But then as I was writing about a lot of experiences just triggered my PTSD and triggered panic attacks, and it was like it was all kind of coming up to the surface. So I
Mm.
had to drop out of the writing group and spend more years healing before I could go back to writing again. So it's been a really long, long process of getting this latest book out.
You know what? I can understand that. I mean, not every time do you write something is it intended to be shared in a public way, or even with one other person. Sometimes it's written just for you, just for your own way of releasing, in a sense, or processing things. So
Right.
so are those that are possibly hidden on your computer potentially nuggets that might be found and revisited at some point to see if perhaps that's something you want to share?
Oh, could be. I think most of the really juicy hidden nuggets are in my book.
So they're already out there.
They're already out there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All the things I was absolutely terrified to share are in my book.
So that's a really, if I may, I'd like to
Mhm.
ask you about that, because you just said something so profound. All the terrifying things are already in my book. And some might have thought that all of those terrifying things were in those hidden nuggets, and those weren't the things that actually came back through to be written into your book. So, oh, first off, before we go any further, you need to mention the name of this book and talk about how it felt to, or the process that you went through to decide that it was okay to share these things that were so vulnerable.
Mhm. So the name of the book is Unseen Connections, a memoir from pain and violence to joy. And what else did you ask
That's
me?
an amazing, I just think the
Oh,
title is just a beautiful title too.
oh, thank you.
But yeah, but no, I'd like to know how it felt to process that, or like to decide that you're going to bring these things that were so vulnerable, not just up to the surface, but to publish them in your book. How did you go through that process to decide it is okay to go do this, or it's okay for me to go do this?
Right. So one piece was I decided that writing my memoir, I was going to rewrite the story of my life. So it felt like my life was a total failure, that I didn't, it's my whole life has been really weird. There, nothing about it is normal. And so I always felt like I never fit in. And so rewriting the story of my life, I wanted to create somehow, I didn't have any clue, but I wanted to create some kind of a container where I could be okay, where my life and my weirdness, um, it's like I needed a new model. I needed something different than the reality of the world out there. So that was the main goal that I set out in the writing. So in each of the really tough chapters, I wrote I wrote it and then I went through it. I experienced what was going on and then I transformed what was taking place inside my body. So one little piece I didn't put in was after the spontaneous awakening, then I became a whitewater river guide, one of the first female whitewater river guides for years and lived in the wilderness. And then I came out of the wilderness and I decided to get a PhD. And I received a PhD in cellular transformation. Well, I'm the only one that has a PhD in cellular transformation. And this was back in 1985, before anybody was even remotely talking about all this stuff that I've been talking about and seeing. So for years, I've had clients and done profound work with my clients. So I took all that knowledge and really used it in depth with myself on each chapter of healing my deep wounds as I wrote the book.
So, how did you decide that after you've gone through that process and you've written that chapter or chapters, that you wanted to share it and make it available in a published book versus saying, I've written this for myself and this helped me just because I did this for myself? How did you make that transition to know that this was, that putting it in a published work was the right step for you?
So that also evolved over time. So in this first writing group, I wrote uh, I wrote parts about being on the river, and all the people in the group came back and said, "Oh my God, I love this. This is good." And it was like, "Oh, you mean I can write?" I had no idea, you know? And so that kind of encouraged me. And then years later, recently, I joined a writers group, and it was amazing. It was a 6-month group, and we all posted our work every day for 6 months and read each other's work. And I felt very safe in this group. And they kept encouraging me. It's like, we want more. We want to hear more. And I'm going, oh, can I really write about that? And then they go, yeah, it's okay. So I had this community, this group that made me feel safe.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And if I hadn't had that safety, I wouldn't have gone so deep in the book.
I can understand that. And I definitely believe that having supportive, encouraging people around you, uh, regardless if you're writing or running your own business or in any facet of life, you need that at least one or two other people in your life who say, I believe in you. I
Mhm.
want you, I can see so much goodness in you and I want you to share this in the world. Or, hey, what are you doing? I know you can do better. What's going on? And helping you to get to be your best self. And it's so cool that you had a group who was so encouraging and to create that safe space. I think that was definitely important for, especially with the type of writing. It sounds like it was just that process to go through, I think needed to be safe, especially to share it like you did.
Yes, yes. I remember one point I published some little piece and I said, is it okay? Is that too bad? And one of the women reading it said, what's really weird is that your dad built bombs. That's what's really weird. And that kind of lifted this whole, oh, yeah, I'm okay.
That's awesome. That's funny that you got that. So then,
Uh,
so to your point about like how deep to go, what to include, what not to include,
mhm,
how did you decide, like especially when you're writing on any given topic, as with a nonfiction book, you can come up with so many ideas that you can,
mhm.
you could go crazy thinking of all these different ways you can talk about a topic, or just with one topic and brainstorm all the ideas that you could possibly include into one book. And it actually could be like a 3 book
Right,
process.
right.
So how did you go through that process to know what to include and then what not to include?
So what I really tuned into my inner knowing and just kept tuning in to like what feels right for me. So a lot of why I wrote the book, another layer of why I wrote the book, is wanting to assist other people. For years in my work with my clients, at some point they'd all say, "Oh, I've never told anybody about this." And a lot of what I'm writing about is multidimensional. After my spontaneous Kundalini awakening, I was aware of all these dimensions that we all live on. And it's something that's rather forbidden to talk about. And for years, clients would say, I had this experience, but I've been afraid to ever tell anybody about it. And I realized that there's this whole cultural reality that we're only supposed to be a certain way. And that only in this small little third dimensional viewpoint of who we are is what's okay. And yet, what I see and what I know is we're all these amazing beings, and we have these incredible talents or wisdom that's been hidden, especially in women that I found. And so I really wanted to create a space where people could read my story, and that would give them permission to expand more into who they really are.
I love that. Permission to expand into who you really are. I
Mhm.
think that when I think of a nonfiction book in general, I think that the reader is picking that book up because they are looking for some kind of transformation. And to me, a nonfiction book is, you know, architected, it's designed so that when you pick up that book, you're at one spot of your journey. And then by the time you finish said book, you've gone through this process and you've gleaned nuggets. You might have even done all of the things listed, or it's changed how you look at things in some way, but it's created, if not a first step, a big first step, if you will, into what might be next, a possible next piece or a transformation. So it sounds like you were just that. I mean, this is what your book is. It's really helping people with that transformation.
Yes, yes,
That's amazing.
yeah.
That's amazing.
And so then writing my book, and I'm going through this transformation, and COVID hit, and so I thought, okay, this is the perfect time to really get my book done. You know, we're all kind of hibernating. I'm going to write. But then I kept getting hit by these waves of fear. And I realized it wasn't mine. I was tuning into the collective conscious fear. So this would be like at the beginning of COVID. Um, and sometimes the wave would hit me and I'd be kind of out for a day or two. So I realized I wanted to disconnect from that collective consciousness and the collective unconsciousness. And it felt like I wasn't supposed to. It felt like I was supposed to be in this fear and carry all this burden that everybody's carrying. But I didn't want to do that. And so I created a way to create boundaries and cut myself off from the collective. And in that process, as I kept doing that, I kept going in deeper and diving into all the dimensions and charting out what's happening on each dimension. And then I started charting out what's happening in all the DNA on each dimension. As I'm writing my memoir, all of this is unfolding together. And so what evolved was this whole new map of human reality in the middle of writing my book. And so that's kind of the last part of my book, which was totally unexpected, but it created a complete framework for me to see my life in a whole new way.
I like when that happens. You might have an idea. You probably have an idea where the book will end, and you know about where you wanted to start. And there might even be a few pieces that you know along the way. But when the writing guides you, whether or not you're in fiction and you're letting your characters guide you, and then one starts to do something like, oh my goodness, okay, come back over here, we'll follow what you're doing too, but help me understand, kind of thing. But
Right.
in nonfiction, the reader is a part of that. They are getting involved in that book, and they're on that journey. So that's cool that as you were going through that, you found even a little bit more that you could do that what you thought initially. That's really, really neat. So how did when you're going through any kind of writing like this, any kind of expression of creativity, if you will,
Mhm.
um, that I call it the inner editor, that little
Right.
voice inside going, who do you think you are you kidding?
Right.
What in the world? That's not good. Go rewrite that, or go do that over, or that's not good. Nobody's going to read that. Did that creep up for you in, especially as you started getting more into the groove of writing this? Because I get that it would have happened at the beginning, but when you started to really get into the groove and with the support writing group, the supportive writing group that you had, did you still face that inner editor at any point?
Oh, yeah.
How'd you get
Oh,
over
yeah.
it?
Um, well, a lot of the work I do is about facing those inner demons. And the way I work with that is through gratitude. So it's not just kind of, it's a intense practice of gratitude. And what I do is I go in and I spiral gratitude around the thoughts. And this whole practice came up from a whole nother part of the book, which is where when I was 60, I lost all my money and almost everything I owned was stolen. And I was living in a tent in the wilderness
Oh my
in a
gosh.
place where I knew no one. And I was in massive pain and I was ready to kill myself. And the day I was going to kill myself, this energy erupted from my guts and said, choose gratitude. And I
Wow.
thought, I have nothing to be grateful for. And so we did this little negotiation, and I thought, okay, I will choose gratitude 100%. And if it doesn't work, I can always kill myself later. That
Oh
was the
gosh.
deal. That was the
Oh
deal.
gosh.
So I had this massive commitment to choose gratitude in every moment, no matter what. That was my deal. I agreed to that. And in this choosing, I could see what was happening in the cellular structure of my own body. So I would be in massive pain and I would spiral gratitude around it. And I could see how the cellular structures in my body were changing. I could see how the gratitude was moving. Sometimes it's in spiral, sometimes it's zigzag. And so throughout all of that, I wrote a book on radical gratitude and how it works. And I use it in my practice with my clients and with myself. So writing the book, when the inner critic comes up, so I just thank the inner critic. I thank him for whatever he wants to say. And then how it works is all those low frequencies can't exist in the high frequency of love and gratitude. So I have a low thought of, oh my God, no one will ever read this. And so you just bring in thanks and it just breaks up that whole old pattern and it just dissolves.
It
So
almost, it almost, I'm sorry. What I was processing was that it sounds like you're, you're almost letting that, it's almost kind of like seeing somebody wounded or you're a wounded part to say, hey, it's going to be okay. I appreciate you trying to bring this to my attention. What can I do with this? And, but I know you meant well. And
exactly.
so that's what I hear what you're saying. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct.
Cool.
And all the nasties and the gremlins and all that fear, what it is, it's all trying to protect us. It's trying to keep us safe. Because beyond, so in mythology, there's always this gremlin that's hiding the gate or the doorway into the magic land, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what's happening inside our bodies. And so as we thank whatever this energy is, it dissolves. And then there's an opening into this next layer of absolute wonder and magic.
Well, I have to tell you that this has been an amazing conversation. So can I just offer gratitude to say thank you for making the time and to really share such depth and such love, because I hear love at the bottom, at the root of all of this. I hear love, and I hear love from a sense of wanting to make things better, to serve others. I hear love as you can reflect it onto yourself, and to just creating that space for others really, with it, whether it's for a book or with a client or however. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. So how can everyone connect with you and where can they get your book?
So you can connect with me on my website, drcynthiamiller.com. You can get my book on Amazon, through Barnes and Noble. You can buy it through your local bookstore. And I would love for you to read my book.
I mean books, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia. It has been a pure joy having you.
Oh, thank you so much. I so enjoyed being with you.